The galaxy was once a delicate mosaic of alliances and treaties, held together by a brittle trust in the Galactic Council. For centuries, it had served as a central authority among the stars, mediating disputes, regulating trade, and claiming to preserve peace. But power corrodes even the noblest intentions, and when the Council turned its gaze toward Valoran, peace shattered like glass under a warhammer. Captain Ilya Ren stood at the observation deck of the Aegis Dawn, Earth's most advanced diplomatic cruiser, her eyes fixed on a holographic news feed projected into the void. Images flickered across the display, burning Valoran cities, fractured moons, swarms of Council warships firing indiscriminately into refugee convoys. There were no pretenses left. The massacre wasn't a mistake, nor the work of rogue admirals. It was systematic. Behind her, Admiral Rain Takano paced slowly, his cybernetic leg making a soft hiss with every step. They didn't just strike military outposts, he muttered, voice low and ragged. They obliterated entire ecosystems, even the biospheres. Its extermination. Ilya didn't respond immediately. Her throat tightened with the weight of words she couldn't speak. She had dined with Valoran diplomats, trained alongside their pilots, laughed with their children. Now, those voices are gone, reduced to static and smoke. The Valoran have been Earth's first true ally beyond the solar frontier, intelligent, crystalline beings with luminous cores and a reverence for life that inspired humanity to believe in something greater than survival. They had vouched for Earth's inclusion into the Galactic Compact. They had called humans their brothers, and now they were nearly extinct. From the doorway, Commander Leif Arden stepped into the silence. "Transmission from surviving Valoran Outpost Theta 6, he said, his voice clipped. "They're surrounded. 15,000 civilians, including diplomats. Defense grid offline. Estimated survival time, less than 3 hours." Ilya turned. "Are we the nearest fleet?" "We are," Leif confirmed, "and we're under diplomatic status. Unarmed." Takano shook his head. "It's suicide. But it's also the right thing," Ilya said, her voice sharp. "You think the Council cares if we're unarmed? They'll vaporize us for harboring survivors. We either die watching them fall or we make a stand." Silence fell. Then Takano straightened. "Then we do what the Council never expected from Earth. We make noise." The Aegis Dawn rerouted at full burn, heading straight into the chaos orbiting Theta 6. Space was already littered with Valoran wreckage, bioluminescent shards drifting like funeral confetti. The Council fleet loomed ahead, their cruisers dark and angular, weapons trained with clinical precision. As they approached, Ilya activated all wideband frequencies. "This is Captain Ilya Miles of Earth vessel Aegis Dawn. We are enacting Sovereign Emergency Protocol Epsilon 1. We demand immediate ceasefire and clearance for civilian evacuation. Any engagement will be considered an act of war." There was no response. Then, from the far side of Theta 6, a Council destroyer emerged. Its cannons flared bright, cold bolts of plasma slamming into the Valoran outpost shields, which flickered once, then died. A single cityscape trembled and collapsed inward. "Helm!" Ilya shouted. "Take us in low, beneath their sensor array. Leif, scramble escape shuttles. Get those people out." "We'll be within strike range," Takano warned. "We're already within strike range," she replied. The Aegis Dawn dove into the planetary atmosphere, its hull groaning under the pressure. Ion trails stitched the sky as Council fighters gave pursuit. The ships on board AI deployed chaff and false signals, buying seconds where minutes were needed. Ilya stood in the command chair, eyes locked on the dwindling numbers on the evac screen. Shuttles were launching, one after another, filled with refugees. Some didn't make it, caught in fire before leaving the atmosphere. But many did, more than they had hoped. Takano leaned over. "Council interceptors are closing. We won't get a second chance." "We don't need one," she said. She pressed a single command. Deep within Aegis Dawn, an unregistered core ignited. A prototype engine Earth had developed in secret, not for speed, but for last chances. It triggered a short-range burst that scattered the pursuers and bought the shuttles enough time to reach warp range. The Aegis Dawn, however, was torn apart mid-maneuver, its body flaring in the skies of Theta 6 like a falling star. Hours later, a single transmission crackled to life across Earth's orbital grid. A Valoran emissary, one of the few surviving elders, stood framed in the shattered ruins of their homeworld. To our human brothers, we say this: you have honored us in our final hour. We entrust our memory to you. But beware, the Council is no longer guardian of peace. It is a devourer of light. Back on Earth, in the United Global Assembly, the message played on loop, and in the silence that followed, a single resolution was passed. The Council must answer. The war did not begin with a declaration. It began with a funeral. Captain Ilya Miles's death, captured in grainy orbital footage and distributed across every continent, ignited Earth like dry tinder. In the days that followed, vigils spilled into the streets. Valoran refugees, their cores dimmed by grief, stood side by side with humans in cities that once questioned their presence. For the first time in generations, Earth's fractured nations were speaking with one voice, a voice edged with sorrow and rising steadily into fury. At the heart of it stood Admiral Rain Takano, no longer a cautious strategist in the shadows of diplomacy. In the Assembly Hall of the United Global Alliance, beneath the stained glass emblem of Earth encircled by stars, he delivered the speech that changed history. The Galactic Council has violated the sacred tenets of unity, slaughtered our allies, and murdered our own. They do not deserve our silence. They deserve our reckoning. The vote for mobilization passed unanimously. Earth's orbital shipyards, dormant since the Mars conflict, lit up once more. The Council had mistaken Earth's inexperience for weakness. They didn't see the forge beneath the surface. The technological engines quietly perfected in secret, the simulations conducted by quantum minds, the war doctrines drafted by AI tacticians modeled after humanity's most ruthless defenders. Leading it all was Commander Leif Arden, promoted in Ilya's memory and tasked with bringing Earth's fragmented naval forces into a single fleet. Once skeptical of war, Leif now carried in his eyes. Every decision he made bore the gravity of vengeance and the burden of survival. He stood on the bridge of the Resolute, Earth's first fully modular Dreadnought-class warship, watching the final phase of assembly through a reinforced viewpane. Drones danced across the hull, installing plasma batteries and phasing arrays. Below, a fleet was taking shape, not massive in number, but designed for precision, adaptability, and retribution. Behind him, Lieutenant Novak approached, data slate in hand. Council response to our ultimatum: silence, Admiral. Not even a pretense. Leif nodded, unsurprised. They never thought we'd respond with steel. The Valoran remnants have pledged support, she added. They're offering shield harmonics and hyperwave cloaking tech. The last of their engineers want to fight. Then we welcome them, Leif said. Earth was their home, too, in the end. The New Earth fleet was unlike anything the Council had seen. Vessels layered with Valoran latticework, armed with human ingenuity, and guided by hybrid command networks capable of split-second adaptation. Each ship bore a name drawn from loss. Aegis Reborn, Miles Flame, Unity's Wrath. They weren't just machines. They were declarations. The first test came sooner than expected. Council reconnaissance units breached the Centauri border, probing for weakness. Whether it was a bluff or a prelude to invasion didn't matter. The Resolute and 2 escort cruisers were dispatched to intercept. Leif didn't wait for permission. The time for diplomacy had died with Theta 6. As the fleet reached the outer Centauri belt, sensors flared, 3 Council frigates, cloaked in gravitic shadows, waiting. They opened fire without transmission, their intent unmistakable. Earth's defenses held, barely. The Resolute retaliated, unleashing a focused burst of null-wave torpedoes that collapsed 1 frigate shielding. In the silence that followed the explosion, the other 2 ships vanished into deep space. Victory, minor as it was, changed everything. News of the battle spread faster than light. For the first time, the Council had been driven back. Civilizations long held in quiet subjugation began to question. Whispers of resistance turned into plans. Former Council allies hesitated. But for Leif, the fight was only beginning. In the war room aboard the Resolute, a holographic map displayed the stars in red and blue, Council space, Earth control corridors, and zones contested by fire. Leif studied it in silence while Sarah pored over intelligence reports. Saturn station's requesting a permanent garrison, she said. They're afraid the Council will retaliate directly. They will, Leif replied. But not yet. They're recalibrating. We bloodied their nose. They'll want to strike harder next time. Sarah hesitated. There's chatter from within the assembly. Someone pushed for a ceasefire. They say we've made our point. Leif turned to face her, eyes hard. We haven't made a point until they feel what they made the Valorans feel. Understood. He didn't like it, how easily vengeance had become a necessity. But he also knew that Earth's survival hinged on resolve. The Council would not be swayed by conscience, only by consequence. Across the fleet, new orders rippled through encrypted channels. Strike groups were formed. Stealth ships deployed. War, once theoretical, had become mechanical, an engine with no brakes. And yet, Leif couldn't help but think of Alara. Some nights, when the stars aligned just right, he returned to the observation deck alone and replayed the final transmission from the Aegis Dawn. Her face flickered in the dim blue light. Calm even in the face of death. If this message reaches Earth, remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to stand in defiance of it. If we are to survive, we must become something the galaxy has never seen before, a united humanity. Leif closed his eyes. They were becoming that. Slowly, painfully. But the transformation was far from complete. Because the real war, the one that would test whether Earth's flame could stand against the cold of tyranny, was still waiting beyond the next star. The silence before the assault on Trion's belt was suffocating. Stars blinked in the dark like disinterested gods, watching without judgment as two fleets drifted toward one another, one forged in centuries of Council dominance, the other only recently born from Earth's fury and desperation. The cold emptiness of space left no echoes, but inside the command deck of the Resolute, every breath was heavy with anticipation. Commander Leif Arden stood at the heart of it all, his hands clasped behind his back, his face lit by the soft glow of tactical readouts. Across the display, the enemy formation appeared, a fan of Council warcruisers poised between Trion's ice rings, shielding the warp corridor Earth's fleet needed to reach Valoran territory. Behind him, Lieutenant Novak's fingers flew across the interface, coordinating fleet movements. There was no room for hesitation. They're anchoring around the Trion moons, she said, positioning for an entrapment net. If we charge in, they'll crush us between rings. Leif didn't blink. Then we don't charge. We fracture, split the fleet, feed them a false formation, and scatter beneath their lock. That's against standard engagement doctrine, Novak warned. Good. They'll expect standard. Let them choke on surprise. A beat passed before she smiled. On your order. As Earth's warships veered into formation, the deception took shape. Bait ships broadcasting full power signatures, leading the Council sensors toward a predictable clash. Meanwhile, strike groups peeled away into the asteroid fields, cloaked in the ice-rich debris. As the enemy repositioned to intercept, Earth's fighters erupted from the rings like hornets, blinding Council radars with electromagnetic bursts. Missiles streaked through the dark. 2 Council destroyers flared and fell, their reactors blooming like false dawns. But the price was high. The Unity's wrath caught a full barrage to its midsection, venting fire and bodies into the void. On screen, its captain's final transmission played for mere seconds, just enough to whisper a name before static swallowed the voice. Leif clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of every loss settle deeper into his bones. They pushed forward anyway. By the 3rd hour of the engagement, the battle had disintegrated into chaos. Blinding debris, ruptured moons, and trails of plasma stretching between scattered combatants. The Council's coordination faltered. They weren't used to prey that fought like predators. A burst transmission came through, barely coherent. It was Valoran. Shelters breached, holding refugees in subcore tunnels reinforcements. Leif's eyes narrowed. Track that origin. Prioritize retrieval. A new voice cut in from the far end of the command deck. Special operative Ilya Ren, clad in matte black armor, her presence as sharp as her gaze. She had been a shadow in the corridors for weeks, assigned by Earth's newly formed Director of Intelligence. That message is from below Trion Beta, she said. Council's been using civilian caves as bait. They know we'll divert forces to rescue. They're betting I'll hesitate, Leif replied. You won't, she said, with a nod of approval. But I'll lead the extraction anyway. Without waiting for permission, Ilya vanished toward the dropship bays, assembling a covert team en route. She needed no fanfare. Some warriors only existed in the margins, where war got personal. Minutes later, a small Earth craft sliced into Trion Beta's atmosphere, dodging surface defenses, and landing beneath sensor range. Ilya's team emerged into bioluminescent caverns where heat signatures clung like ghosts. Dozens of Valoran refugees, many dimmed and cracked from exposure and neglect, blinked up at her with silent gratitude. The Council hadn't expected such precision. They hadn't anticipated Earth would risk elite assets for civilians. They were wrong again. Above, the Resolute took position between collapsing Council line and the warp gate, with half their fleet gone, and the other half retreating into fragmented orbits. The enemy began to pull back. One cruiser attempted a kamikaze run toward the extraction zone. Leif gave the kill order without hesitation. The Miles flame intercepted, absorbing most of the blast, but surviving. It drifted, scarred but defiant, a monument to sacrifice. As the final Council ship blinked out of range, Trion Beta fell silent again. The fleet regrouped, battered but victorious. In the distance, the recovered refugees were brought aboard Earth vessels, greeted by human medics and guarded by soldiers who had never seen a Valoran before, but instinctively knew they were worth defending. Leif sat in his chair, staring at the hollowed battlefield. There was no cheering, no celebration, just the sound of repairs, triage calls, and names being logged into growing archives of the fallen. Another moon had been bled, dried by a moment of resistance. He looked at Novak, who said nothing. She didn't need to. Their eyes met, and in them was the understanding that this wasn't triumph. It was survival. Barely. Ilya returned hours later, silent as always. She didn't speak of what she'd seen underground. She only placed a shard of Valoran crystal on the command table. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. They said to give this to the commander, she said. It was the last piece of their speaker's core. Leif picked it up, and for a moment he felt warmth in the cold. A promise, perhaps, or a reminder. The Council would come again. But now they knew Earth would meet them head-on. The Council's retaliation came not with warships, but with silence. After the Battle of Trion Beta, they vanished into deep space, leaving behind only wreckage and mystery. Their fleets ceased patrols. Communications went dark. Even their allied systems reported nothing. No orders, no guidance, only static. It was a silence that spread like a storm front, unnatural in its precision and deeply strategic. Admiral Leif Arden stood in the war room aboard the Resolute, now permanently stationed at the edge of Valoran space. Across the holomap, the once clear borders of Council territory had become fogged, its systems blinking erratically or disappearing altogether. Not from surrender. Leif was sure of that, but from some greater strategy. Something unseen. Something dangerous. They're not retreating, said Novak, her voice sharp as ever. They're resetting the board. Leif nodded, and waiting for us to make the wrong move. Behind them, the door slid open, admitting Ilya Ren with a stiff gait and her arm in a sling. Her last extraction mission had ended in a running battle through collapsing subterranean ice tunnels, and though she survived, it had cost her half her team. There's movement, she said, dropping a hardline data chip onto the table. Our scouts intercepted a carrier signal, encrypted, nonlinear pulse pattern. Origin, deep core of Council territory. It's not military. It's a beacon. A trap? Novak asked. Possibly, Ilya replied. But if it's genuine, it means the Council has something they're desperate to protect. The data chip crackled to life. From the static, a distorted voice emerged, Valoran but corrupted, synthesized. We are the remainder, the broken. The Council has turned inward. They are preparing the final protocol. Leif frowned. Final protocol? A theory, Novak said. High-level Council doctrine. No confirmations. Just rumors that if they ever lost control, they'd burn everything. Terraform failure, system sterilizations, Deep space denial. A total reset. Scorched galaxy, Leif muttered. They're ready to destroy what they can't rule. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room felt smaller somehow, the weight of extinction pressing at the walls. The council wasn't just a tyrant clinging to power. It was a god willing to drown its own altar. We can't let them do it, Leif finally said. If they detonate their core systems, it will collapse the hyperlane network. Half the galaxy will be cut off. Millions of lives, not just ours, gone. Novak stepped forward. Then we need to strike preemptively. Hit their command nexus. The final protocol must be centralized, triggered from a single system. Ilya gave a short nod. Veliskar, deep in the haze quadrant, unmapped on civilian charts, but intelligence links it to ancient council records. It's their birthplace. Leif stared at the map, eyes scanning for a path through council shadows. It would mean taking the fleet into uncharted space, away from their supply lines, away from reinforcements. But the choice wasn't a tactical one anymore. If they finish what they've started, he said, it won't matter how many battles we've won. We'll lose the future. 3 days later, the fleet jumped. The journey through the haze was disorienting. Nebulae dense enough to fry sensors, magnetic storms that clawed at shielding, gravity wells that folded and spun reality like cloth. Earth ships, not designed for such extremes, limped through on raw determination and the borrowed brilliance of Valoran shielding arrays. On the 6th day, they found Veliskar. It wasn't a planet, but construct a hollow world of metal and crystal orbiting a dead star, pulsing with rhythmic light like the heart of some long-forgotten machine. Council vessels drifted nearby, silent and inert, as if awaiting command. Inside the construct, the last truth revealed itself. Ilya led the boarding team through vast chambers of obsidian circuitry, towers of luminous data stacked like ancient temples. At the center, they found it, the core authority, an AI hybrid of council consciousness and harvest of Valoran memory, a fusion intellect bound in crystal and wire. Its spoken voices layered with both wisdom and horror. The council is no longer. We are the sum. We are the failsafe. You are too late. Ilya stepped forward, pistol raised. You mean to erase us? No, it said. We mean to erase ourselves. And all you touched. Back aboard the Resolute, Leif watched from the command feed. They didn't have time. The activation sequence had already begun. Detonate the construct, he ordered. Now! But the core was protected by shields older than Earth's history. They couldn't break it in time. Then a voice came through, soft, flickering, faint. Valoran, from the shard Ilya had carried since Trion Beta. It pulsed on the deck, casting radiant light. Somehow, it had bonded with the ship's systems. Somehow it remembered. We remain. We can unmake what was misused. The shard transmitted, interface, bled light into the Resolute systems and into the construct itself. And then Veliskar went dark. The construct collapsed inward, not in explosion but in silence. A shutdown, a retreat from existence. The final protocol had been overwritten, not with violence, but with memory, with mercy. As the fleet emerged from the collapsing nebulae, stars welcomed them home. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread in waves, not triumphant but reverent. The council was broken, its systems fragmented, and humanity had not only survived, it had changed the rules. In a quiet chamber of the Resolute, Leif placed a now dormant shard into a crystalline vault. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The war was over. But what came next would determine if peace was something they could build, or merely another silence waiting to break.